Welcome to Teolumen Insights, where we reveal the hidden forces that shape the way you live and show you how to use them to create real transformation and supercharge your health, mindset, and daily life. Here are your hosts, Emma Greenwood and Nathan Sinclaire.
Believe it or not, what follows is an AI-generated conversation, one designed not to mimic humanity, but to illuminate it.
Teolumen Insights, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really venturing into some fascinating territory. We're looking at that intersection of, well, secret government research, consciousness, and this emerging science of subtle energy.
Yeah, it's a topic that seems to capture a lot of curiosity and, honestly, for good reason. The listener questions really got us thinking about how deep these connections run.
Absolutely. And it's not exactly new, is it? This government interest in, the power of the mind, it goes way back, especially during the Cold War.
Oh, definitely. The Cold War era was intense, high stakes. Governments were exploring pretty much any potential advantage, and that included the mind itself.
Which brings us to things like MKUltra. That was the CIA, right? Experimenting with LSD and other drugs.
That's the one. Trying to figure out mind control, essentially. How to influence or even break down a person's mental state. Pretty dark stuff.
And it wasn't just the CIA, was it?
No, the Pentagon had its own programs. You had chemical testing, for instance, at Edgewood Arsenal. They recruited young servicemen.
And exposed them to chemicals, like what kind of chemicals?
Compounds like BZ, it's highly classified, involves secrecy oaths.
Yeah.
The goal, as one journalist, Tara Palmieri, put it rather chillingly, was basically to change their brains.
Wow. BZ. I've heard that described as like inducing one of the worst experiences imaginable.
That's the reputation, yes. A truly incapacitating agent designed to disrupt mental function profoundly. It wasn't about subtle influence, it was about shutdown.
Okay, so drugs, chemical agents. Then the story shifts again, doesn't it? With the CIA and the Monroe Institute. The gateway process.
Right, a very different angle. That involved using specific sound patterns. Think sophisticated binaural beats.
Binaural beats, where you hear slightly different frequencies in each ear and your brain creates a third tone.
Exactly. The idea was that these specific audio patterns could induce altered states of consciousness.
Yeah.
And the hope, or maybe the belief, was that in these states people could develop, well, psychic abilities.
Psychic abilities, like what?
Things like remote viewing, perceiving distant places or events, or maybe even influencing time somehow. It sounds like science fiction, but they were seriously investigating it.
Which leads us directly into Project Stargate, right? That seems like the big one in terms of investment.
It was certainly the most well-funded and long-lasting public-facing program we know about. We're talking nearly $20 million between roughly 1972 and 1995. Significant funding for that time, especially for this kind of research.
And the main focus there was remote viewing.
Primarily, yes. Could certain individuals access information about distant targets? Things they couldn't possibly know through normal sensory means? That was the core question. SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and later SAIC were heavily involved.
And did they? Did they claim success?
Well, the documentation, the proponents of the program certainly did. They talked about over 500 missions claiming actionable intelligence was gathered. There's even a figure cited, like an 89% return customer rate, suggesting intelligence agencies found the information useful enough to come back for more.
Actionable intelligence from remote viewing. That's quite something.
It is. They went so far as to state in some reports that informational psi, gaining information via extrasensory perception, was, quote, a scientifically valid phenomenon. They were even trying to build physics and neuroscience models to explain how it might work.
Okay, just pausing here for a second. We've covered secret drug tests, chemical exposures, sound-induced states, government-funded psychic spying. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And understanding this sort of checkered history is key when we pivot to what's happening now, because the exploration didn't just stop.
Right. Which brings us to people like Dr. Garret Yount at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS.
Exactly. Dr. Yount's work is fascinating because in many ways it's a continuation of this deep interest in consciousness and human potential, but approached with modern scientific rigor and transparency. He spent over 20 years at IONS studying energy healing.
And his interest isn't just academic, is it? I read he had some unusual experiences himself as a child.
That's right. He talks about having clairvoyant experiences, moments of knowing or seeing things beyond the normal senses. That personal history seems to have fueled his scientific career path, leading him into molecular neurobiology, but always keeping an eye on consciousness and these, what he calls extended human capacities.
So he studies the brain at a molecular level, but also these bigger questions.
Precisely. And he collaborates widely. He works with spiritual healers, biofield practitioners from all sorts of traditions, trying to understand the mechanisms behind what they do.
Biofield practitioners, that's about the energy field around the body.
Generally, yes. The idea that there's an energetic component to living beings that can be worked with for healing. And INS itself is crucial here. It was founded by Apollo astronaut Edgar Mitchell.
The Edgar Mitchell, wow.
Yeah. He had this profound epiphany during his journey back from the moon, a feeling of interconnectedness, and became convinced that science needed to seriously engage with spirituality and consciousness. So INS became that platform.
So you see INS and Dr. Yount's work as a kind of evolution, moving from those covert, maybe strategic government programs towards a more open scientific investigation.
I think that's a fair way to put it. The focus shifts from, say, weaponizing the mind to understanding its potential, particularly around concepts like subtle energy or qi.
Qi, like the life force in traditional Chinese medicine.
Exactly. But Dr. Yount approaches it not just as a metaphor, but potentially as a fundamental aspect of reality itself, something that manifests maybe as vibrations or energy interactions right down at the molecular level.
And his methods are totally different from the Edgewood Arsenal days, I assume.
Oh, absolutely. It's modern science. Collaboration with willing participants, ethical oversight, trying to measure effects, understand mechanisms at the molecular neurobiological level. How does intention or energy work potentially impact our biology?
It feels like a huge shift from trying to impose changes from the outside with drugs or chemicals to understanding the body's own subtle systems and potential.
It is a big shift. But, you know, the shadow of those older programs still lingers, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. MKUltra, Stargate, they're officially over, partly declassified. But does that mean nothing similar is happening now?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Declassification is a slow drip. It can take decades for information to come out. So it's hard to say definitively what might be going on under different classifications or project names.
Like the gateway process that only really surfaced in public awareness recently through things like TikTok years after it supposedly ended.
Exactly. It shows how long things can stay under wraps.
Yeah.
So while the CIA might not have cracked time travel or reliable remote viewing back then, it doesn't mean related research just vanished entirely. The public fascination certainly hasn't vanished.
And the scientific view on something like remote viewing is still pretty mixed, right?
Very much so. You have the Stargate proponents claiming their archives show scientifically valid informational sci-fi. But they also concluded there wasn't enough evidence for causal psychokinesis, moving things with your mind. And the broader scientific community remains, well, largely skeptical about remote viewing's validity or reliability based on the available public data.
Yet the government poured millions into it, so they must have seen something promising, or maybe they were just worried the Soviets were ahead.
It's likely a mix of both. Promising early results, maybe, or just extreme Cold War paranoia about the other side getting a psychic edge. It's hard to know the exact motivations without full transparency.
Let's circle back to Dr. Yount's personal story. You mentioned childhood experiences. Was there a specific one that really stood out for him?
He shared one from his teenage years. He'd hidden something from his parents, and then he just knew, had this internal vision almost of them finding it. He described it as feeling like he was seeing beyond space and time limitations.
And instead of just brushing that off, he tried to understand it scientifically.
Yeah, that seems to be his nature. He started reading widely Asian philosophies, esoteric texts like The Opening of the Third Eye. He was looking for frameworks, for ways to make sense of these experiences that didn't fit the standard model.
Which, as he acknowledges, wasn't easy within mainstream science back then.
No, he mentioned how resistant the traditional scientific world often is to these topics. He even jokingly called his colleagues at INS refugees from the hard kind of materialistic science realms. It highlights that INS provides a space for researchers willing to explore these less conventional areas.
And his core concept is this subtle energy.
Yeah.
How does he define that, really?
He sees it as truly fundamental, like the basis of reality, manifesting down at the molecular level as vibration, energy. He thinks it affects everything, our health, our relationships, how society functions. It's not just out there, it's in here too.
In his book, Why Vibes Matter, he breaks it down into types, right, to make it more understandable.
Yes, 3 types: conscious, subconscious, and superconscious vibes, which is a really helpful way to think about it.
Okay, so conscious vibes. That's the obvious stuff.
Pretty much what you see, hear, smell, touch. Someone's clothes, the way they speak, the look of a room, that all gives you a conscious vibe, information your senses pick up directly.
Makes sense. Then subconscious vibes. That's where it gets more interesting.
Definitely. This is stuff operating below your awareness. He gives the example of pheromones, essentially odorless chemicals that can still influence how you feel about someone or your behavior without you realizing why.
Like that experiment with women's tears.
Exactly. That was a striking one. Men were exposed to the scent of emotional tears, which they couldn't consciously smell, and it actually lowered their libido, even their testosterone levels dropped.
Wow. And they didn't feel sad or smell anything.
Nope. Their bodies just reacted. It shows how powerful these subconscious signals can be.
Okay, so conscious, subconscious, and then superconscious vibes. What's that level about?
That's where things get really interconnected. It's the level where the idea of being a separate individual starts to dissolve. Different traditions call it the God mind, the unitive mind. It's often accessed through things like deep meditation.
It's a state of oneness, kind of.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, a sense of connection to everything.
And is this superconscious level connected to healing, like self-healing?
Dr. Yount strongly suggests so. We already know the placebo effect is incredibly powerful, right? Our own minds can trigger profound healing responses.
Yeah, the placebo effect is well documented.
He mentioned David Hamilton, a chemist who actually left the drug industry because he was so impressed by how often placebos worked just as well or even better than the drugs, but without the side effects.
That's quite a statement.
It is. And Yount proposes that maybe ancient healing traditions worked partly because they gave people a context, a belief system, that allowed them to tap into that innate self-healing capacity, maybe by accessing that superconscious state.
So accessing the superconscious mind, getting beyond just our everyday thinking mind, might be key to unlocking that healing potential.
That seems to be the idea, moving beyond the ego, the constant analysis, into a state where that interconnectedness is felt, and maybe where the body's own wisdom can operate more freely.
So if someone wants to explore this, practically speaking, what can they do?
Well, he suggests working with healers who actually teach you self-practice, empowering you rather than just doing something to you.
Makes sense. Any specific practices?
He personally practices Qigong. Those gentle movements combined with intention, focusing on moving qi or energy within the body. It helps connect you to subtle sensations.
Qigong. I've heard of that.
He also mentioned lucid dreaming, becoming aware you're dreaming while you're dreaming. Some researchers, like Charlie Morley, are exploring its potential for actually working through trauma within the dream state itself.
Transforming trauma in a dream. That's fascinating.
It is. The common thread seems to be getting out of the constant chatter of the thinking mind. That's often the first step.
He mentioned a specific Taigong technique. Something simple.
Yeah, dumping buckets. It's really just about focusing the mind. You imagine water flowing down your skin, or focus intensely on the feeling of your feet on the floor. Even these simple, mundane focuses can quiet the mental noise and increase body awareness.
So it's about shifting focus, getting present in the body.
Exactly. And it's not just about the mind. The heart plays a role too, doesn't it, in terms of vibes?
Oh yeah, the electromagnetic field of the heart. Research from places like HeartMath.
Right. They've shown the heart generates a powerful electromagnetic field, and the pattern of that field actually changes depending on your emotional state. Compassion looks different from anger, energetically speaking.
And that field extends out from the body.
It does. And crucially, that energy signature can apparently be detected by others nearby. It provides a potential scientific basis for that feeling of picking up a vibe from someone just by being near them.
Okay, this is leading towards something else Dr. Yount is really interested in. Telepathy.
Yes, he's had a lifelong fascination with it. He notes that telepathic experiences, knowing what someone else is thinking or feeling at a distance, seem quite common, even if people don't talk about them much.
And he's actually researching this in the lab now.
He is. He just got a new grant, and he's taking a really novel approach. Instead of focusing solely on the brain as the receiver, he's looking at the gut.
The gut brain, you mean the enteric nervous system.
Exactly. That complex network of nerves in our digestive system. We talk about gut, feelings, intuition. He's wondering if that's literally where some telepathic signals might be received.
Why the gut instead of the brain?
His hypothesis is that the brain, especially our conscious mind, is noisy. the ego, performance anxiety, trying too hard. It might interfere with picking up subtle signals. The gut, potentially, might offer a cleaner signal.
So how would that experiment work?
Basically, you'd have a sender focusing on an intention or emotion, and a receiver hooked up with electrodes on their belly, measuring the electrical activity of their enteric nervous system. They'll look for correlations. Does the receiver's gut physiology change in sync with the sender's intention?
That's a really cool idea. When is that starting?
He said the study is planned to begin in January. And he actually mentioned that if listeners in the Bay Area are interested in participating, they should keep an eye on the IONS website closer to the time.
We'll definitely link to that.
Yeah.
What about skepticism? A lot of this sounds, well, out there to many people. How does Dr. Yount deal with skeptics?
His approach seems pretty pragmatic. He engages with people who are genuinely curious, open to exploring, but he doesn't waste energy trying to convert hardcore debunkers. He really believes personal experience is the most powerful persuader.
Personal experience? Like, is there something simple people can try themselves?
Yeah, he offered the hot hand test. It's a way to potentially experience moving qi, or maybe more accurately, influencing your blood flow, just with your mind.
Okay, how does that work?
It's simple. You just gently touch your fingertips together.
Yeah.
Then pick one hand and really focus your attention on it. Vividly imagine that hand becoming warm, really warm, maybe even slightly tingly or heavy.
Just focus and imagine warmth.
Yeah, hold that focus for a minute or two. Then compare how your two hands feel. Many people find the hand they focused on actually feels warmer, maybe even looks a bit puffier or redder.
Why would that happen?
The likely explanation is increased microcirculation. Your focused attention influences the tiny blood vessels in your hand to dilate, bringing more warm blood to the area.
So it's a direct mind-body effect.
Exactly. And he makes the point that this isn't just a party trick. Improving microcirculation is actually fundamental for tissue health, for getting nutrients in and waste out. So even this simple exercise connects to preventative self-care.
Interesting. Okay, shifting gears slightly. What about the vibes of places? Can places hold energy?
He talked about conscious vibes in places first. How we intentionally design spaces, like for a party or a wedding, to create a specific mood or feeling.
Right.
That's pretty straightforward.
Right, setting an atmosphere.
Then there are subconscious vibes in places. He mentioned studies where subtle cues in a room, like seeing a briefcase versus a backpack left behind, could unconsciously make people behave more competitively or cooperatively.
So the environment subtly influences us below awareness. But what about, like, residual energy, places feeling haunted or holding on to old emotions?
On that, he said the hard scientific evidence is lacking. It's very difficult to measure. While people across cultures report feeling vibes in places, good or bad, some of those feelings might have other explanations.
Like what?
He mentioned two key things. Infrasound, very low frequency sound we can't hear but can sometimes feel, and it can induce feelings of dread or unease, and carbon monoxide poisoning, which can cause hallucinations or a feeling of being watched.
So some haunted house stories might actually be due to low frequency sound or a faulty furnace.
It's definitely explained some historical cases, yes. Environmental factors mimicking paranormal experiences.
What about sacred sites, though? Places like Stonehenge or other locations people feel have special energy for healing or contemplation.
He acknowledged that interest, but said that the specific sources we looked at didn't really have scientific studies on things like less lines, for example.
Okay.
But he did mention research on Stonehenge focusing on acoustics. The way the stones are arranged might amplify sound and potentially create infrasound as a byproduct, contributing to that feeling of it being an extraordinary place.
So sound could be part of the effect?
Possibly. He also didn't dismiss the idea that places used for ritual or intention for centuries might accumulate some kind of energy, even if we don't currently have the tools to measure it scientifically, according to these specific sources. It remains an open question, really.
It definitely does. So, wrapping up this deep dive, it feels like we've journeyed from, well, rather unsettling government attempts to control the mind, through psychic spy programs, all the way to modern scientists trying to rigorously understand consciousness, subtle energy, and our own potential for healing and perception.
It's a really complex and frankly fascinating trajectory. From covert ops to IONS labs, I think the big takeaway is that this exploration is very much ongoing, and it touches on questions fundamental to who we are and how we interact with the world, and maybe even our own capacity for well-being.
Yeah, that potential for personal discovery and self-healing feels like a really key thread running through the more recent work.
Absolutely. And if listeners want to explore further, Dr. Yount's book, Why Vibes Matter, is a great starting point. Plus, the Institute of Noetic Sciences website, that's noetic.org, has a ton of research papers, articles, and information about their work.
And opportunities to participate, right? Like that gut telepathy study coming up.
Exactly. They have a Participate in Research section on their site, so people can see what studies are currently recruiting. The gut telepathy one is slated for January, mainly for people in the Bay Area, but it's worth checking their site for updates.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us on this really mind-bending deep dive today.
Teolumen Insights.
Teolumen Insights. And if you enjoyed this exploration or found it thought-provoking, please do remember to like and subscribe. It really helps others find the show.